Hello everybody, Ben Woodruff here with another Falconry video. Today's video, I'm going to be talking about red-tailed hawks. I'm up here in the mountains of northern Utah with Neytiri. Neytiri is a red-tailed hawk. She has got adult coloration, and if you can see, she has a red tail, which is where the species gets its name. But not all red tails have a red tail, and I'll get into that in a few minutes. Now Neytiri, I've had her for a few years, and I inherited her. She came out of kind of a semi-rehab situation that then ended up on a falconry permit. So she's a partial imprint, which can cause some problems potentially, and I'll get to that in a few minutes as well. For this video, when I'm talking about red-tailed hawks, we need to understand I'm in America. Here in the United States, we incorrectly use the term hawk to mean a lot of things. Strictly speaking, hawks are accipiters, which a goshawk is kind of the most universally recognized accipiter. You can see she's looking around because she's hearing all the tree squirrels chattering at us. She's like, are we gonna go eat those right now? No, right now we're recording a video. So goshawks, accipiters, forest hawks, the true hawks, they have long tails, short, broad, rounded wings, and they're built to dodge trees and chase things in dense forests. That's what they're built to do. Those are the true hawks. Now, just recently, taxonomists have changed and divided it up. So now part of the accipiters are accipiters and part of them are something else. I don't even remember what it is yet. It's very recent that has been changed. So if you're watching this video years from now, yeah, I acknowledge that. Accipiters have been broken up now. But basically, the forest hawks, the true hawks, are called hawks. Birds like this are called buzzards. It's like, how dare you say that? How dare you utter that word? Buzzard is almost a bad word in America. All of you watching this video elsewhere, you're like, what's the problem with that? So here's the idea. Back in like medieval times, people would, a goshawk was a proper hawk. It was a true hawk. And birds in Europe, such as, for example, the common buzzard, which looks quite similar, though not as powerful as a red-tailed hawk, but quite similar in build. Buzzards are, in general, kind of slow. They're not very gamey. And in medieval times, they were viewed as not a proper falconry bird. And so the term buzzard was sort of a derogatory term, excuse me, compared to the noble abilities of a raptor, like a goshawk. Well, a buzzard was kind of a lesser bird in the mindset of medieval falconers. And so the term buzzard kind of became a slang term for, like, you're just an old buzzard. Well, in America, in the 1700s and 1800s, that term made it through slang terms. And what happened was, there's a bird here called a turkey vulture, and people started calling that a turkey buzzard. And they started calling vultures buzzards. New World vultures, like the turkey vulture, are not at all related to Old World vultures. Old World vultures are like griffin vultures and things like that. Those are distantly related to eagles. And hawks like this, or buzzards like this, are a different lineage altogether than vultures. So to clarify again, true hawks are your forest hawks like a goshawk. Birds like this are technically a buzzard. We should call this a red-tailed buzzard, but we don't. And the term became derogatory. So again, Americans, when you say buzzard to us, we have this, it's almost a derogatory slang term, whether you're calling a person a buzzard or whether you're calling a bird a buzzard. We don't have that bias elsewhere in the world, but we do in America. So again, this should be considered a red-tailed buzzard, but we call it a red-tailed hawk. So for this video, when I say red-tailed hawk, I understand it's a buzzard, but that's just the thing. Now, compared to the other buzzards, red-tailed hawks are impressive. These feet are enormous, they're powerful, they're much more gamey than other species of buzzards, and we'll get to that in a minute. But let's talk about the birds themselves, and then we're going to get into them as a falconry bird. So red-tailed hawks are a New World species. They live in Canada, the United States, and Mexico, and they are supreme generalists, and that is why they're so successful. They can live in this environment, and there is a pair of red-tailed hawks that nests just across the street from where I'm at right now every year, and they hunt squirrels and Uinta ground squirrels and the occasional birds, things like that. Well, red-tailed hawks also love to live in farmlands where they will sit on a foam pole and they'll just hunt whatever rodents they find underneath. So you'll have that Oh, I'm gonna pause this just for a moment because I got some people who are skiing by me. Give me just a second here. Okay, back to recording again. You always have to, one of the things, just so you know, in falconry, people have a right to wildlife in general. That is my viewpoint. People do better going into wild places and experiencing wild things. If you become a falconer or a wildlife educator and you get a bird through any means, maybe an injured bird that needs a permanent home, or a captive bred bird, or a wild trapped red-tailed hawk, anytime that people want to see that bird, don't hold it over them. Don't be smug and be like, I am a licensed blah, blah, blah. So no. Give them the chance to see and experience this bird. You have put in that effort to get whatever permitting and training you need. But it's really crucial. It's better for society if everybody has a chance to get up close to a bird of prey in a friendly and open-minded way. And that's what I think. So anyways, those had some cross-country skiers just come by me and just chatted with them for a quick minute there. So back to red-tailed hawks, a New World species, extreme generalists. They will live in forests. They will live in extreme deserts. They'll live in prairie lands. They'll live in farmlands. They're built to hunt rodents. That's really what they're built for. But they can hunt a wide range of things. They want to hunt like mice and rats and voles and gophers and things like that. That's what they're built to do. But their feet are enormous. For a buzzard, they have ridiculously overpowered feet. Red tails are not the largest buzzard in the New World, well, in the United States. Let's stick with the United States because we get off the rails if we get into the entire Americas. Red-tailed hawks are not the biggest. They're one of our biggest buzzards, one of our biggest bootios, soaring hawks, but they are, on average, our most powerful. The largest is the ferruginous hawk, and ferruginous hawks can be downright enormous. There's a big discrepancy between males and females when it comes to ferruginous hawks. Now, I've flown a lot of them, and with all birds of prey, the females are larger than the males. But that discrepancy between male and female is much larger in ferruginous hawks than, say, with like a red-tailed hawk. And so, but still, even a male ferruginous hawk is very large, but even a big female ferruginous has, on average, not as powerful of a grip in the feet as a red-tailed hawk does, because a ferruginous hawk is built to just go after things like prairie dogs and ground squirrels out in open prairie lands. That's what they want to go after, little stuff and they want powerful but short toes so they can just kill them quickly and maybe even slurp them down whole. Ferruginous hawks have a big oversized mouth and they will often swallow their dinner whole, and it's a way that works for them. And so having shorter toes means they're less likely to have a squirrel turn around and bite them. Red-tailed hawks will go after everything. Even though they will hunt that same prey base like prairie dogs and ground squirrels, they will also hunt rabbits and hares. They will hunt pigeons. They will hunt ducks and pheasants. They will hunt tree squirrels, actively chase tree squirrels through the trees. It's incredible. And that is why they have such a broad range. Even in Central Park, there's a pair of red tails that nests on one of the skyscrapers there, and they just mostly hunt pigeons. They'll hunt some of the squirrels in the park, but mostly they go after the pigeons that everybody's feeding. So this is, if you have a species that can go anything from a mouse to a rabbit to a pigeon, that is a very broad prey base, and that really speaks well to just how adaptable red-tailed hawks are and what incredible hunting birds they can truly be. So you can find them just about anywhere. But we got to talk a little bit about the coloration. This, I would call this color morph a kind of a honey chestnut color phase. Red-tailed hawks have a wide range of color. Remember I mentioned earlier they're called red-tailed hawks because of that red tail, but no red-tail hawk has a red tail until they are 1 year old. Once they go through their first molt, then they get grown-up colors, and they will get a new set that matches that every year for the rest of their life. So in other words, you might be out in the field as a bird watcher or a new falconer, and you see a red-tailed hawk and it doesn't have a red tail, and you think, that's not a red tail. No, it might be. Not only that, they have such a range of color morphs that there's even different subspecies. For example, kind of up in the Pacific Northwest and into Alaska, you have what's called the Harlan's red-tailed hawk. That red-tailed hawk is pretty darn black, but it's not just melanistic. As an adult, when the red tail should come in, usually there's no red whatsoever. It's just kind of black and white streaked, kind of similar to a juvenile bald eagle, like a 3-year-old bald eagle is sort of what it looks like. They might have a couple streaks of red in there, but not much. That's the Harlan's red-tailed hawk. You also have the extremely pale to almost white Kreider's red-tailed hawk. And these are subspecies of the same species. They're both red-tailed hawks, but they're both sitting on the edge of becoming new species. So given enough time, enough range distribution, enough isolated breeding, they would become new species of hawks. But right now, they're different subspecies. So a beautiful range of color. I've never seen an unattractive red tail. First year birds are typically quite pale. They might have kind of a belly band. You can see Neytiri here does have sort of a dark belly band, but on a lot of the first year red tails that we see coming through here in Utah, it's more pronounced. They're very pale, kind of creamy white and sort of almost chocolate black belly band, and sort of muted tans and browns, and then they get these rich red colors at once they reach adulthood, even on the back. I don't know if you can see, hopefully the colors are showing up. From my view, that looks pretty pale, but even underneath everywhere, red-tailed hawks are just glorious in their coloration. And I think that's part of the draw of them. I think it's just such a striking bird. Very successful and very striking. Now, red-tailed hawks in falconry, let's talk about that. Because I grew up in the 1900s, back in the day, and when the laws in my area at that time were the fact that you can only start off with either an American kestrel or a red-tailed hawk. And sort of the attitude among most of the falconry sponsors was, nah, a kestrel is more of just a toy. It's just a little something, just a little bird to work with. You're not ever going to do any real hunting. Obviously, we now know that is not the case, especially using digital scales to dial in the weight managed perfectly. All kinds of micro-hawking birds have proven their way, like sharp-shinned hawks and, of course, merlins. And Cooper's hawks are pretty small as well. There's so many little species that have really proven their worth, and they're absolutely wonderful birds to hunt with. But the idea back then was a kestrel is a toy, and a red tail is a beginner's bird. Most of us back in those days, we would get a red tail as our first bird, because the thinking was, well, I need a proper hunting bird. I got to do proper falconry. I need a sizable bird to do that. And so most of us started off with red tails. And you might fly your red tail for a few years, and you have good success. You're hunting out here in the West. We were hunting jackrabbits and cottontails, off the fist mostly. And then from there, you're going to move on to something a little bit more gamey. Maybe you get a goshawk, or maybe you get a prairie falcon. And that was just sort of the normal evolution of things for falconry back in my younger years. Well, now that's changed. The laws have opened up, so an apprentice can have just about anything, and things are a lot more open. And so where does a red tail fit in that? Is a red-tailed hawk a beginner's bird? Is it not? Well, depending on where you live, red tail might be the perfect bird to have long-term. A lot of eastern and southeastern falconers hunt big tree squirrels, like tree squirrels as big as a rabbit, as heavy as a cottontail rabbit, big. We don't have anything that big here. All of our tree squirrels, like you hear them chirping around, barking at me and Neytiri here, those squirrels, they're much smaller. They can still be hunted with a bird like this, but they're far, far smaller. So what I'm talking about is putting your hawk up into a tree, and then you just go walking through the forest, and anywhere it sees a squirrel, it chases it and it catches it and it brings it down to the ground. That is incredible hawking, and the agility for such a broad-winged bird to have such agility cutting through branches and just crashing through is absolutely incredible. Now, that form of falconry runs some risks because with these bigger toes, a tree squirrel can turn around and bite them. Now you could say, well, that's dangerous to the bird. Red-tailed hawks do it in the wild, in the hardwood forests of the eastern United States and eastern Canada. They do it on their own. So it's not something they don't do otherwise. But there's hawking chaps that can be put on the feet of a bird to kind of wrap leather around. So the anklets we put on, special chaps are made that extend leather down to offer more protection for when they catch a tree squirrel. Now, many of the falconers who I have known in eastern Canada and the eastern United States who have flown red-tailed hawks, they'll get a red-tailed hawk, they'll fly it, and then they'll just keep it for 20 years. And that's just all they fly. It's like, why do I need anything else? This is the perfect bird. Now, you could get a faster, more agile bird like a Harris hawk or a goshawk, but if a red-tailed hawk is doing great, Red-tailed hawk is a no-nonsense bird. They're not a stressful bird to work with. They're incredibly easy and agreeable once you have them trained, where goshawks are always high maintenance. Harris hawks don't do well in the cold, and they have much more delicate feet. If a squirrel bit their toe, it's a lot more dangerous. So just keep a red-tailed hawk. So a lot of these lifelong falconers in the eastern part of North America, they really view a red tail as that's the bird. It's the bird of the area. It's the bird that we use. Kind of like in the Middle East, where Saker falcons are kind of the bird. Like, we're going to use Saker falcons and we're going to use them to hunt Habara bustard. That's just the way. This is just what you do. So this is very true. They can do that. Now, I'm from the western United States, where we do have mountains, but mostly we have big open country. We have sagebrush and open deserts. And we normally have a lot of jackrabbits and cottontail rabbits. And that's what we normally use our red tails for. Normally they are hunted off the fist, which is you're just walking along, rabbit flushes, you yell ho, 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 and your hawk chases down the rabbit and hopefully catches it. It's kind of unfair, the fact that the eastern United States, red-tailed hawks are much bigger than our western red tails, and yet we hunt bigger game. There's no jackrabbits back east. Back east, they're just like, snowshoe hares and cottontail rabbits, and yet they have the bigger red tails. Meanwhile, we have these giant, enormous jackrabbits out here, and we have smaller red tails. But you know what? Even a male red-tailed hawk, small male, western red tail, properly trained, can still take down a jackrabbit with absolutely no problem. So what kind of hunting do you do? It just depends on your area. You can hunt them off the fist. You can hunt them from a T-perch that you walk around with. You can hunt them, like have them follow you along in trees, or following you pole to pole, fence post to fence post. And because in the wild, this red-tailed hawk, she would just go to a tree and she would just sit there and wait for something underneath her to move and dive down on it. Well, if you are going to flush prey, these hawks really quickly learn to follow you along. What do you see? She sees a bird or something up there. She keeps cocking her head up there. So you can train them to follow you along tree to tree, and they'll fly a little bit ahead of you, and then whatever you flush, they'll come out and get. It works. They very quickly learn to make this work and to be a highly effective hunting technique. So something to consider. One of the coolest ways to hunt a red-tailed hawk is soar hawking. And I'll put a link down below to a video. There's some falconers in California who made some amazing videos back in the day and part of these videos show hunting red-tailed hawks from a soar. And they really show just how agile and nimble and fast a dialed-in proper red-tailed hawk can be. So I'll put that link in the description down below. One of the interesting things, if you train a red-tailed hawk to soar, then, and which is really easy to do, by the way, you just go to the top of a hill with a trained red tail, you set them down on the top, and you start walking down the hill with some updrafts, and then they go to follow you, and then whoa, the updrafts throw them up, and then you call them down. Then you go further, and you start flushing game for them, and they learn really quickly, hey, I just got to soar over, and they will turn directly into the wind. When they turn into the wind directly, they literally stay in one place. They're not moving at all. They're just sitting there, moving, and then if you go downwind, they should turn and go and stop and hover, and not hover, they just, the Bernoulli's principle of flight, as air is flying up over them, it just dials in, and they can just stay literally in one place making tiny micro adjustments, and when a rabbit flushes out, they dive right down. It's kind of funny that sometimes the rabbits are like, oh no, there's a hawk, or there's a human over there. If I go over by that human, the hawk will leave me alone, and the rabbit comes right over to you, and then the hawk goes and catches a cottontail right at your feet. It's pretty wild to have that, but I've had that happen on more than one occasion. So red-tailed hawks are really good birds, but when you get them can make an enormous difference. I 100% recommend do not get your bird as a baby. Do not pull a red-tailed hawk from a nest. Now, she came from a nest. She was an imprint. I don't remember the whole situation, but she came into a raptor rehab center up in northern Utah years ago, and then was trained over to a falconer who got her. But she still has some aggression issues from time to time. So what happens is, if you have a hawk like a red-tailed hawk, and if you imprint them, even imprinting them correctly, you are likely going to have some major aggression issues. Now, you can go through my channel. I have videos on how to avoid aggression, and that applies even with imprints. But still, if you have the ability to trap a wild red-tailed hawk, do that instead of getting one from a baby, because you're going to have huge issues. If you do get one from a baby, or one comes in like a rehab situation, I recommend doing all you can for the bird not to see you. Put an entire sheet over your whole body and go up like a ghost and just hand them food in something that they will not recognize at all until they reach the age where they're starting to fledge, and then introduce yourself to them so that you are not viewed as a parent figure. It's very important, otherwise you might have a face-grabbing maniac. In Utah, the best time to trap a red-tailed hawk is October. An October bird its parents have left it, but it's had, maybe a good month or two on its own, where it started to feel cold, it started to appreciate the idea of hunger, and it's realized, I'm on my own. And then you show up and they're like, hey, this is just the next step. Now this weird human's feeding me and flying me. Oh, hey, now we're going out hunting together. Cool. And it works well. You can trap them later than that. In other states where it gets colder earlier, or you're up in Canada or something, sure, go ahead and get a September bird. But really in Utah, Nevada, kind of that elevation, if you're getting a September bird, you're probably going to run into some problems where they're still young enough that they might still kind of view you in an imprint sort of mindset, which you do not want. The other thing is, if you are going to fly a red-tailed hawk for more than one season, when you first start training a red tail, you first start getting them to eat off of the glove. That is social bonding, because remember, the rule in nature is everybody wants to kill you and take your food, or kill you and make you food. So you giving them food and them accepting it from you is an act of social bonding, because out in nature with birds of prey, everybody's going to kill you and take your food except for your parent or your mate, and your parent will after a couple months. So just your mate, that's the only one you can trust. So it's almost sort of a romantic cue. It's like, hey, you can trust me literally with your life and with your offspring, because we're sharing food. So that's really good. You train a bird then to fly to the fist and fly totally free. You call them to the fist, you call them to a lure. But one of the problems that apprentices do, it is miraculous if you have a red tail flying to the fist the first time. These wings are so broad and big and beautiful, and to have one of these birds come flying up to you and landing on your glove, just stepping right out of the sky, it's magical. It is beautiful to behold, and it's an addictive sensation at first. Once you've been doing it for a long time, it's kind of like, yeah, that's cool. But at first, you're like, you can't get enough of it. You want to do it again and again. And what happens is the red-tailed hawk will start to just associate your glove with the item that it's hunting and killing. You want your bird to be directing foot-based aggression towards prey items or a lure that represents a prey item. So you want, once they're trained, you want to keep flying to the fist to a minimum. And you want to have the amount of food you feed on their glove to also be kept to a minimum. And the reason is, otherwise your bird is going to turn into a face-grabbing maniac. And it will happen so over that molt. So you get your bird in October, you fly it all fall and winter. Spring, you put your bird up for the molt, which means you start fattening them up and letting them get ready to grow new feathers for the summer. And all summer long, you're feeding them. You might be feeding them in the mew, which I do not recommend. I recommend taking the red-tailed hawk out of your mew, the place where you're housing your bird, take them out of there and walk them over to a location where you already have food on the ground. Go ahead and put them on a leash, because in the summer they're fat and they're bouncing all over the place like this, only worse. So, but go ahead and walk them over to the food. So instead of you being a source of food, you are a transportation to bring them to food, which translates back over to when you are walking them out in the field and they see prey and they're going to leave your fist to catch the prey. That is the healthy way that you want to balance that out. You do not want them to think, I need to come to you and attack, and then food will appear. Because what will happen if you feed your bird on the fist too much the first season, or if you keep feeding them in the mew over the molt, then once you get your second fall, the beginning of your second season, you start cutting that bird's weight a little. They've grown in nice new feathers, they're looking healthy, they're clean, you're like, yeah, okay. Then suddenly you fly them to the fist the first time and they land and they grab you in the face. You're like, what the heck is going on? What are you doing? Well, what you've done is you have made the glove itself a prey item, and they're thinking, hey, I'm on a kill. Oh, this person's next to me. They might be a sibling, or they might be another predator. I've got to attack them to defend my food. So you need to disassociate food from the glove. You can still apply them to the fist, but do it rarely and give a very small reward. Make sure your big food reward is when your red tail is catching a prey item, feed them up, or if they're coming to the lure, let them come to the lure and feed up on that. That is what you want to do. So that's kind of the basics. That's kind of the red tails 101. They're incredible species. I do recommend them. They are, in a sense, a beginner's bird, not because of their capabilities, but because they're pretty easy to train. They're pretty easy to get up and running and hunting prey. You can learn all the basics and all the fundamentals of what you need to do to get a bird hunting. They are not as fast as other birds, but again, if you watch that link that I'm going to put to, I think it's the Road to Bakersfield is the video. I'll find it. I was watching it earlier last week, so I'll link it in the description and you can watch it. All the red tail videos in that are incredible. To see a red tail properly in its prime doing what it should be doing, that's what you're going for. So there's nothing wrong with, if that's all you ever fly ever again is a red-tailed hawk, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But just remember that a red-tailed hawk, don't take the easiness of it to mean that it's not a good hunting bird. They are great falconry birds, but also if it's not the bird for you, don't fly one. If your circumstances are such that a different species would work much better, don't be like, hey, a red tail, big, cool, proper bird, yeah. No, find whatever bird you have prey for in your area and find whatever bird you actually can hunt properly. That you have time, you have land available and prey that you can hunt with your bird and choose it based off of that. And if a red-tailed hawk is the bird for you, then you're going to have a great old time. So I hope you enjoyed seeing Neytiri here, and I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit more. She's kind of bouncy. We're still going to go flying out, and we've got to beat the sunset. And this time of day, she knows, she's like, come on, let's go up in a tree. We got to go flying. We got to go flying. But I wanted to record this. We had a little bit of sun, wanted to get it before the sunset. So hope you enjoyed this. If you haven't already, if you could hit subscribe to my channel, I appreciate it. If you want to support the channel, there's a link down below. You can support me on Patreon. And as always, happy hawking.